When the prophet Job lost his family, his words were, Adonai Natan va'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach. The Lord has given, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be God's name. And these have to be our words now as we face the loss of our mother and sister and grandmother and great-grandmother and relative and friend and social activist, Bell Likover. And we say Adonai Natan, that the Lord gave her to us. She enriched this world, made it very meaningful for her and for us. And we now say Adonai Lakach, and now God has taken her from our midst. But because we were so privileged to have her as part of our world, we say thank you, God, with the words, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach. Blessed be God's name. This is a time in which we need comfort. So we do what people have done throughout the centuries, and that does remind me if you want to check your cell phone. And we say, Esa Enai El HaHarim, Me'ayin Yavo Ezri Me'im Adonai Oseh Shemayim Va'aretz. I lift up mine eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian. God is your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. Adonai yishmart seitcha uvarecha me'ata v'ad olam. God will guard your going and your coming now and forever. The words of the 23rd Psalm, and if you are able to join me, please do. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Adonai ma'adam v'teda ehu, ben enosh v'tachash vehu. O God, what are we that you have regard for us? And what are we that you are mindful of us? We're like a breath. Our days are as a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed and in the evening fades and withers. You cause us to revert to dust, saying, Return, O mortal creatures. Would that we were wise, that we understood whither we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted, and behold the upright, they shall have peace. God, you redeem the soul of your servants, and none who trust in you shall be desolate. In the book of Ecclesiastes, it is written, L'chol zaman v'la'et l'chol chefetz tachet hashamayim, et la'ledef v'et lamut, et latat v'et la'kur netuyah. For everything there is a season and a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. And actually, this is just one of those moments, which is both a time to keep silent, because when you're a mourner, you do find it difficult to speak and to share. On the other hand, what we know about mourning is that you talk your way through grief, and the more that you can talk, the better off you are. So indeed, this is a time right now of talking and listening and sharing. It's a time of storytelling. It is a time which, and I would like to say to all of you who come to pay a condolence call, the best thing you could do for the family, because there are no magic words that take away their loss. The best thing you can do is tell them a story. How did Belle touch you? You know, and I know you're always worried that if you say something, they're going to break down and cry. But that's their job. And your job, and the best job you can do of all, is just hold them and let them know that you care, comforting them. Your presence is the greatest gift of your being here today with them. So there are no magic words, but on the other hand, we have to tell the story of Belle. And we begin that. I'm going to call upon Dorothy Silver.
My husband, Reuben, and I came to Cleveland in 1955, and we met Belle and her family almost immediately. She was pregnant with her last child, Rachel, and I was pregnant with my first child, Paul. Very soon we were swept up in the Likover extended family, which was extensive. The Likovers have a way of embracing people with great warmth. So I have well over a half century of vivid memories of family interactions between us. Lots of laughter, some tears, the whole range of feelings and understanding that come with an intimate relationship. I and my children will cherish these memories as long as we live. In honoring Belle today, I would like to read a brief passage from the Old Testament. I did not get Belle's approval for this, but I think it would be okay with her. I also think the person who wrote this observation a few thousand years ago probably met a woman just like Belle and was thus inspired to write a woman of valor. A woman of valor. Seek her out, for she is to be valued above rubies. Her husband trusts her. All the days of her life, she is good to him. She opens her hands to those in need and offers her help to the poor. Adorned with strength and dignity, she looks to the future with cheerful trust. Her speech is wise, and the law of kindness is on her lips. Her children rise up to call her blessed. Her husband likewise praises her. Many daughters have done well, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive and beauty short-lived, but she has truly earned praise. Give her honor for her work. Her life proclaims her praise. And now I'd like to read a wonderful note written by Susie Ratner on her own behalf and for her sisters Betsy Seifter and Debbie Paris. We are Belle's Cleveland faux daughters, but the bond between us is as deep and true as any blood tie could ever be. To start at the end, Belle dictated that no speaker at her funeral speak longer than 3 minutes. Now, this is not a woman to sum up in 3 minutes. On the other hand, you don't ignore Belle. She knows what an audience can take. To say that there is no one like her is an understatement. Belle stopped driving a month before she died at 97. She exercised in the water the day before she stopped eating when she decided that she wasn't getting better, because she was going to die living the whole way. Most of you know Belle was short, very short. But she was the most outsized, commanding, and effective presence that you will ever meet. Her list of achievements alone would knock your socks off. From organizing with our mother Eleanor at Ohio State, the Independent Women's Association, working for Spanish War relief, surviving the death of a young husband in World War II, building a second life with her wonderful husband, Ed, to bravery against the House Un-American Activities Committees, to going to grad school for a master's in social work with me at 23 and Belle near 50, to running the JCC, to organizing seniors to understand the prescription drug benefit and the ACA, to lobbying in Columbus on behalf of seniors, to teaching adult friends to swim, to baking a challah for every Rosh Hashanah, to making us enamel jewelry, pottery. Belle never stopped achieving and participating, but that doesn't tell her story. Her real story is embedded in who she was, this wonderful woman who loved her children, loved her family, loved her friends, very hard to get through this, loved her community, and loved us, was the definition of an optimistic realist. Approaching 98, she talked realistically about mortality, but put it aside to live each day as if there would always be another tomorrow where she could make a difference. And the difference she made for us is all the difference in the world. Now, my special privilege today is introducing the speakers who have come to celebrate Belle's life with us. So may I introduce our Senator, Sherrod Brown, and his spectacular wife, Connie Schultz.
Less than 4 months before he died, Louis Likover, he always signed his notes to me, his emails, Louis, sent this email to me about his mother, in part. Hi, Connie. I have some good news and an interesting story for you. My mom had been back from rehab about 10 days when I came out from California to do my rotation. All 4 of us are taking turns. When I came a week ago, Saturday, she was on oxygen, moving very slowly, using a walker, having all her self-care done for her, basically a nursing home at home. She was happy to be home, but demoralized about her condition. As you may know, her nightmare was always to lose her independence, and she was always adamant about not wanting her life to extend without decent quality. The next day, I started asking her to do things for herself. What I found out was she could do most things herself. The first thing she wanted to do was send a letter about her dispute with the IRS. As she started doing more things for herself, her mental abilities and memories started to come back. Within a few days, she was off oxygen and dressing herself rather stylishly. After another few days, she started making her own food, made calls to others, and showed an interest in everybody. Today I heard from my sister that she called the oxygen people to take their stuff away and was going out shopping. The last week I have spent with my mother has been one of the best of my life. Seeing what a 97-year-old is capable of is astounding. Her functional memory is better than mine, even at slightly diminished capacity. She is full of humor, fun, and hope. This letter means so much to me for several reasons. Of course, the first thing I thought about was on July 6th, Louis was suddenly gone. And reading his letter, I remember thinking at the time, well, that Belle Likover was just going to live forever. It was really hard to think of anything else. When you mentioned Belle's height, I was sitting back there and I recalled saying something to her once about her height because she was the size of my mother. And my mom died at age 62 in 1999. And I said to Belle one day that she reminded me of Mom because of her size. And I said, she used to fit into me just so whenever and Belle immediately just came in, saddled up into me, and put her arm on my back and said, like this. And we just stood there for a moment or two, and she knew I was getting very emotional, and she just kept patting my back. Sharon and I have a favorite memory of Belle that spans several decades. She had a habit of calling each of us for help, never for herself, always for someone else, and she was really strategic about it. Because Belle figured if you call with only one request, it's easier for us to say no. If you always call with 3, it's pretty likely you're going to get at least 2 because we're feeling like, wow, we can't keep saying no, no, no. And as I once said to Sherrod after I told him I was doing yet another speech that Belle had asked me to do, and he said, I thought you didn't have time. I said, Sherrod, think about it. And it was always this way. I used to tell myself, well, if Belle Likover is still out there at age 80, how can I not be doing something? Age 85, age 90, and on it went. So here we are, Sherrod and I. We don't know if Belle would have wanted us to do this for her, but we knew that one last time we wanted to come through for Belle. It's our way, I guess, of saying to our sweet, beloved friend, for some things, Belle, you never have to ask.
Belle was born the same year as my mother. She grew up in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, as many of you know. She remembered her childhood as a happy one, but surrounded by suffering of neighbors through the Great Depression. In interviews several years ago, Belle talked about the lasting effects those memories had on her, saying, we saw everybody else suffer. There was a constant stream of people who came to our back door for food. My mother never turned down anybody. Those experiences shaped her activism throughout her life. In high school, she was the only girl on the high school debate team, no surprise. She said she learned to never, this will shock you, never be bashful about speaking out. And at OSU, with her friend, you may remember her friend, I think all of you remember her friend at OSU, her roommate in the late 1930s, Eleanor Burt. You remember her as Ellie Weisberger Weintraub, or you remember her as Lincoln Paris's great-grandmother. And I was at an event about 5 years ago, and both Ellie, I met her as Ellie, and Belle were over in the corner talking, reliving those days at Ohio State some 70 years earlier, and I had the good fortune of sitting there just with the two of them while others were doing whatever they were doing in the room. And they were talking, I'll never forget this, I don't know which one said it, but the other one agreed and laughed that they, in 1938, they started the Anti-Fascist Society at Ohio State, and that almost got them thrown out of the Ohio State University. And if that doesn't sound like Belle Likover in training, I don't know what does. As a child, she had asked for a chemistry set instead of dolls, and she always liked chemistry. And as you know, Ed, who she married later after the war, was a chemistry teacher initially before McCarthyism reared its ugly head. But she had asked for a chemistry set. In college, a chemistry professor told her, if you want a PhD, you better go out and marry one. That probably didn't go over very well, is my guess. Then when Her first husband, as you know, was killed in action in World War II, leaving Belle with a newborn daughter to raise. She later married an activist, chemistry teacher, later union house painter, union activist, Ed, who raised children together. And Ed was a great man in the community, as Belle was a great woman in the community. But when Belle was 45 years old, she saw the creation of our country's greatest social insurance program. She saw the creation of Medicare and Medicaid. She devoted her life in so many ways after that to fight to protect those lifelines for American seniors, for Social Security, for Medicare, for Medicaid. She published papers without the PhD that her male peers had. She worked at the Jewish Community Center, as you know, at the senior department, where she saw what a difference Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid made in people's lives and how it would change lives. She went to grad school on a JCC scholarship. Throughout the years, she never ceased. Her activism never stopped, as Susie's letter pointed out. I interviewed Belle in the summer of 2015, marking the 50th anniversary of the passage of Medicare and Medicaid. She told me she was thrilled when it passed because she remembered from her days growing up in her activism since how poor older people were, especially when she was growing up. They didn't have Medicaid, they ended up in poorhouses, she told me in that interview. But as Connie said with Belle, it's always the next thing, always something else, always for someone else. So she added, after we talked about how Medicare, she said, do you know how many people can't wait until they can be 65 until they are covered by Medicare? So as always, what are you going to do next? Okay, Medicare's great. What are you going to do next? Just last fall, she joined us on a call with Ohio reporters to talk about how devastating it would be to raise the retirement age. That was Belle Likover, activist and advocate all the time, full of compassion, never bashful, all the way through age 97. It's up to us to continue her battle for justice. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Cuyahoga County Executive Armand Budish.
Good afternoon. I have to say, I am so honored to have been asked to say a few words today. But it's a tough task because I'm limited to 3 minutes. And there's so many wonderful things that I'd like to say about Belle. And the only thing harder than following a U.S. Senator is following a U.S. Senator and a Pulitzer Prize-winning writer. As I thought about what to say, I opened my email to find a highly secret file. Imagine my surprise when I received from reliable sources at the highest level a very recent leaked transcript of a conversation between Belle and God. Now, I too did not get Belle's permission to reveal this transcript, but I'm going to do it. God begins the conversation. Welcome to heaven, Belle. During your time on earth, I blessed you with unique advocacy skills, which you used very, very well. You always spoke truth to power, standing up for those who needed a strong voice. But you can relax now, Belle. You won't need those skills anymore because everything I do is perfect. Belle responds, thank you, God. I appreciate that. But there are a few suggestions I want to make. Really, Belle? Asks God, like what? Belle says, well, for one, there's way too much poverty on earth. Lots of people can't make ends meet. Even in America, with Social Security, it just isn't enough. God responds, but Belle, that's all part of my plan. I understand, God, Belle says, but we'll have to talk about that. And then, what's with Hurricanes Sandy and Katrina? Wasn't Noah's flood enough? God answers, Belle, I understand, but that's all part of my plan. Well, God, says Belle, We'll talk more about that too. And there's way too much illness on earth. I mean, where'd you come up with Ebola and Zika? I appreciate that, says God, but it's all part of my plan. We'll talk more about that too, says Bell. And I have to ask you this, God. Donald Trump? God, was that part of your plan too? Well, Bell, says God, that one got by me. That's where the transcript ends. But that's not where Bell's story ends. She fought for all of us, all during her adult life. She stood up to governors and senators and even presidents. When she saw injustices, she took her arguments to the very highest authorities. And now it's up to all of us to uphold her legacy and continue her fight for those most in need.
The mayor of Shaker Heights, Earl Lycan.
The words woman of valor are a good way to sum up Belle and her life. I actually first knew Belle when I was a board member at the Jewish Community Center, and Belle was the interim executive director. And then we worked together again, and I got to know her even better when she became a Shaker Heights resident, and especially during the time I served as mayor. In both of these very different roles, one as interim executive director of the JCC and the other as an active resident of our Shaker Heights community, Belle did everything with high intelligence, deep commitment to helping others and to social justice, and also a powerful, pragmatic capability to solve problems. Her abilities and her personal qualities allowed her to manage and lead the JCC with great competence during the period she served, but she also used these qualities to strengthen our Shaker Heights community when she became a resident. As her son-in-law told me, when Belle saw a need, she was there, and she filled it. And I well recall a relatively recent call I had from Belle pointing to the problems between police and communities across the country, and asking if it wouldn't be helpful to put together a program where there was an opportunity for our police and members of the community at the Greenbrier where she lived to talk together about their mutual perspectives. And I said, sure, that's a great idea. Belle put the program together, and it was just a splendid success. The police were so eager to do it. The residents raised such good questions, and Belle was in charge of it and had she lived longer, she was going to even do more of that type of programming in our community. Because Belle was an important person in our community, because she was so active and was so involved, our city council and I put together a proclamation to honor her life, and I'd like to read it in part. Whereas Belle Likover worked tirelessly throughout her life to serve the community, advance social justice, and provide help to those in need, and whereas Belle Likover was a passionate advocate for civil liberties and had a key role in a movement to establish and maintain daycare for young children, and later turned the focus of her activism to the elderly. And whereas Belle Likover served as chair for many senior advocacy agencies and was twice a delegate to the White House Conference on Aging and received countless awards for her advocacy for seniors. And whereas Belle Likover was an active resident of Shaker Heights for many years, and Shaker was very fortunate to have Belle as one of our citizens. Now, therefore, City Council and I, Earl M. Lycan, by virtue of the authority vested in me as the mayor of Shaker Heights, Ohio, do hereby express deep appreciation for the life of Belle Likover and for her dedication and service to others, and express condolences to her family and to all those who will dearly miss her.
From the part of Belle's life at JCC, Phyllis Holt.
Hello. I kind of feel very humble. Oh, hello. Hello. Can you hear me? I really feel very humble following all these dignitaries. But this is a personal story of my relationship with Belle as a JCC. I didn't realize at first, but our careers kind of mirrored each other, and I kind of followed her through up until the point of both being, she was the executive director and I was then the branch director of Mayfield. But she came to the JCC as an art teacher for children, and I came as a guitar teacher for children. And then our careers just moved on and moved on ahead. And when I was going to SAS, the graduate school in social work, and working at the JCC, I had a field placement at the JCC. And who was my supervisor but Belle Likover? She changed my whole worldview. She became my mentor. Anything that I would ask her, she had this eloquent answer. She knew everything. She could teach me so much. What did she teach me? She taught me how to do research when we were working on projects together. She taught me leadership skills, which were very important for me later on. She taught me to be political in the very good sense of the word, and she taught me to speak my mind. Well, that sometimes got me in a little trouble because I was a woman. And Belle had wonderful ideas for the JCC, and one of them was to encourage her dear friend Dorothy Silver to come and be the cultural arts director at the JCC. And Dorothy did such a wonderful job as cultural arts director. She made the theater a small but amazing gem. She really brought culture to the Mayfield JCC. And Belle was with her. We were all with her all the way. And then, unfortunately, Belle retired from the JCC, basically because she was a woman, and the boys didn't want her to go any further. But it was such a great loss for all of us at the JCC to not have her and her wonderful ideas and her encouragement. But she went on to do so much more. It was a great gain for our community and everything that came after. But I have this one little story. When I became in a position that I had to hire staff for camp, I didn't know what exactly to look for or do, and I asked her, so how do you do this? How do you employ people and get good people? And she said, you go with your gut. And I did. And the only other good thing that I think I did for Belle was my son Jeff was going to make a movie about exceptional women of a certain age, an older age. And I said, you have to go and interview Belle Likover. And he did. And they fell in love with each other. And over a 3-year period, he made a wonderful story of Belle Likover, which in the final months of her life, she was able to view on the big screen at the International Film Festival. And she was so happy about it. Thank you.
Now representing senior advocacy, Samantha Brooks.
So one of the things that has struck me about the tributes to Belle is that many of you said that Belle called to ask you to do things for her. She always called and told me what to do. And in many instances had a list that I was to follow. But it's hard for me to acknowledge the homegoing of my mother, Belle Likover. My relationship with Belle also spans many years, and we became very close. As I moved into the field of advocacy, what better teacher could I have had? Belle was not only a teacher and an advisor, she introduced me to people who influenced the lives of older adults in the city, region, state, and on the national level. Belle was respected for her opinions related to policy, legislation, and her public opinion was highly regarded. Belle and I hung together. She became my advocacy mother. On occasions that I had to introduce Belle on a personal level, in the community, and during many of the times that Belle received awards, I would get a double take when I got to the part of my description of my advocacy mother. Belle and I would both smile, hug each other, and say, I love you. Belle was very proud of her children and her grandchildren. She talked about you all the time. She shared the grief of losing her husband very early in their marriage and the joy of having her second husband along with the sorrow of losing him. But beyond her children, her spouses, her family, and friends, Belle loved being an advocate for those who needed a voice. Over the years that I was blessed to know Belle, older adults and their well-being was very important to her. As mentioned, Medicare and Social Security became her platform. She worked endlessly for improvements and sustainability of these vital programs. Belle firmly believed that every older adult is entitled to comprehensive health care, that is affordable and accessible, and that the financial safety afforded by Social Security is paramount to maintaining the safety net of seniors. Whenever I hear the line, scrap the cap, I'll think of Bell. For the past 10 years, Bell's advocacy work has been with Senior Voice, a grassroots, nonpartisan coalition whose members represent organizations, not-for-profit agencies, state and county programs, retired labor groups, congressional representatives, and volunteers. Our goal was to educate seniors and the general public on the need to protect and strengthen Social Security and restore the viability of Medicare. We worked to help older adults to understand the benefits of the Affordable Care Act. And more recently, we, like many of you, have been engaged in making sure that the more recent legislation around health care would do no harm to any American. In addition, we worked to make sure that older adults were registered to vote and that they were able to vote. Senior Voice had a well-informed volunteer speakers bureau for which Bell has much of the credit. She developed many of our training tools and presentations. Bell would make us practice our presentation until we got it right, and it met her approval. To date, Senior Voice, and Bell was a founding member, has delivered face-to-face presentations to over 25,000 older adults and those who care for them. There are those who believe that life doesn't begin with birth, nor does it end with death. At birth, Bell's soul was fortified with the divine wisdom, knowledge, and vision that empowered and transformed her physical reality. There are those that believe that when the soul departs from the body, it stands before the heavenly court to give a justice and an accounting of its life's work. That after death, the soul returns to its divine source, together with all the godliness it has extracted from the physical world by using it for meaningful purposes. The soul now relives these experiences on another plane and experiences the good accomplished during its physical lifetime as incredible happiness and pleasure. I can tell you now, Bell is very happy and is experiencing much pleasure. While we will all profoundly miss Bell, we should also rejoice because Bell leaves us with grace, hope, and joy. Bell's soul will remain involved in the lives of those that she leaves behind when it departed this physical life. Her soul will continue to watch over the lives of her children and her grandchildren and will deprive much pride from their deeds and their accomplishments, and to intercede on their behalf before the heavenly throne. The same applies to those for whom her soul was connected in bonds of love, friendship, and community. In fact, because Bell's soul no longer is constricted by the limitations of this physical life, her relationship with her loved ones in many ways will be deeper, more meaningful than before. Thank you, Bell, for being you, for sharing your life with us, for giving us the pleasure of knowing you and loving you, appreciating and admiring you, and admiring the dedication to people and striving to improve the lives of everyone that you touched. One final time, Bill, I love you.
Recently retired director of ACLU, Chris Sling.
Originally, these notes read like 4 volumes of Doris Kearns Goodwin on modern America. And then I remembered what Belle said, and she used to say this whenever we were planning a program, 3 minutes, get off, right? So, dear friends of Belle and Ed and family, Belle was in the middle of all the great events of the 20th and a big part of the 21st century. From Depression and war to campus movements that span the 30s through the 70s. Belle saw what government and politicians could do at their best as representatives of our better selves, and she recognized and fought government when it was at its worst. She experienced firsthand the bold administration of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt. In college, she and a friend hitchhiked to Hyde Park to visit, where they met President Roosevelt's mother and got to play with his dog. Who does this? From those years to the great years striving for equality to the election of Barack Obama. And Belle experienced the tragedy of politics at its worst, suffering from the degradation of civic life by the likes of Joe McCarthy, experiencing that firsthand as a threat to her family, and seeing it again in the persona of Donald Trump. Belle knew the harm or the good government could create for its citizens firsthand. Her work on behalf of protecting the Social Security Act, Medicare and Medicaid, and the Affordable Care Act was unwavering. She knew and understood policy, and she was a superior political strategist. She taught, planned, lobbied, spoke, and trained others to do the same to support these vital programs. And while Belle is best known for her work on behalf of a social safety net for seniors, during her long years of service, she worked almost as frequently on issues benefiting children and families. She believed that instead of appealing to generations based on self-interest, we could garner the support of seniors for expanded health care benefits for children and their parents. She saw health care as a unifying issue. The Democratic Party should have listened more carefully to Belle. Belle wasn't an observer of history. She and Ed shaped history and influenced the future. They would never take on the role of victim, despite the persecution they suffered. Belle had a full and rich life. It wasn't limited to social justice and political concerns. And there were some things about Belle that just personally were charming. As people would say, she was scary intelligent. You engaged in debate with Belle at your own risk. Not because she was unkind or sharp. I can't ever recall her being that way. She had no need to crush her opponent in intellectual battle. But Belle was so well-read, she had so much knowledge at her fingertips, and was so free of inherent prejudices. You weren't going to win a disagreement with Belle. You just weren't. You would be transformed by her logic, beaten fair and square. Aside from that, she had so much training in debate in high school and college, she could easily trounce any opponent. The other thing I loved about Belle was that she loved a good suit of clothes. I mean, she loved fashion. Not what was trendy in Vanity Fair or Vogue, but quality. She knew her stuff when it came to fashion and clothes, the way she knew single-payer health care. Belle loved the cut of a good suit, and she knew the feel of fine fabric. My mother was a seamstress and a union member, and I recognized a woman who knew quality work, and Belle really knew it. She was a terrific friend, loyal and attentive, and she so valued her friends, recognizing and rejoicing in their accomplishments. This was especially noticeable with her female friends and colleagues. One year following the annual Ed Likover lecture at the ACLU, I joined family and friends at dinner with Belle. She introduced me to her college roommate, Ellie Weisberger Weintraub. Prior to dinner, Belle had fully briefed me on Ellie's accomplishments as a child therapist, an author, and an educator. And she did that with every woman she introduced me to. At that time, I had known Belle a mere 20 years. She and Ellie had been roommates, so friends for over 70 years. When the two talked about their time at The Ohio State University, they were like schoolgirls again. They had been up to all kinds of trouble, frivolous and serious. Ellie had made a name for herself by secretly shredding the lists that the dean's office kept on subversive activists on campus. She had a work-study job filing, and she did it really well. But this effort to highlight her friends and their accomplishments extended far beyond her college roommate. While Belle liked for people to know what she was working on, she was eager for you to know about the accomplishments of her friends and family. I came to know so many important and accomplished women through Belle, and it influenced my life a great deal. I actually don't think I ever heard her use the word feminist, but the struggles of women were always at the forefront for her because she had lived through so many of them herself. She talked from time to time about her struggle to join the debate team and how discouraging and insulting college faculty were about her desire to study chemistry. Those lessons stuck with her, and they influenced every political movement that she became involved in. There was a time once when Belle extended that same friendship and support to me, putting her own reputation on the line. Not long after September 11th, there was a controversy in New York City about the desire of the Muslim community to build a new mosque in a location that some found inappropriate. At that time, the ACLU was not enjoying the popularity that it has since the election of Donald Trump. There was a great demand to stop that project from moving forward. I was giving a talk to a small group of Jewish sisterhood on an unrelated topic when someone brought up the mosque issue. I gave the right answer, that the First Amendment would protect a mosque as it would a temple or a church or a Christian Science reading room. But the audience was having none of it, and it turned very hostile very quickly. Belle, seeing that there was no way that I was going to dig myself out of this mess, took her turn at the microphone. With the courage to speak out in regard to the people that had for her great regard, her common sense calmed the audience and restored civility. And I think helped people realize that they were becoming victims of the same hysteria that had damaged them just a few years earlier. That sense of friendship and community building extended to Belle's neighbors at the Greenbrier Apartments. Belle talked frequently about the good life she found there. For her, this meant the friendships among mostly older women, looking out for each other, enjoying outings and cultural events together. Finally, Belle's years as an activist, a community organizer, a policy expert, and in some ways an accomplished politician in her own right, made her a role model for so many of us who had pursued a career in social work professionally or as volunteers in social change organizations. Her work had clarity of purpose and direction, And everything that happened to her in her early life that seemed so difficult and so painful prepared her for this mission to heal the world. We can honor that through our own continued efforts. But it won't be nearly as fun without her.
Now we hear from some family members. Terry Bowen, Belle's oldest daughter.
My father always called my mother the little giant. Small in stature, expansive in vision, intense in purpose, and always accomplishing her goals. She was a feminist before we called people feminists. She was Woman of the Year at Ohio State. After World War II, she organized for continued daycare. During the war, women worked in jobs that men had held, high-paying jobs. But after the war, there were forces afoot that didn't want women to work anymore, wanted them to go home and take care of their husbands and children, and they wanted to abolish the daycare that had been set up and underwritten by government. And so she worked tirelessly to maintain daycare after the war. And as you've heard, her years of working at the JCC, she was associate director of the Jewish Community Centers and twice interim director of the JCC. But somehow the men around her did not seem to envision a woman permanently in that position. As I moved from a technocrat into a managerial position and an executive position, I relied on my mother a lot to make that transition, and would discuss workplace issues with her, having a particular problem in terms of an employee, and she would say, slightly different from Phyllis's recollection about who to hire. She said, you know, most people are in the middle of that bell-shaped curve. And she said it takes an absolutely exceptional person to have these people work, excel beyond themselves, and most people who are managers are unable to do that. The easiest way is to hire exceptional people who are self-directed and able to do the job so that you don't have to do it. So the other issues she helped me were helping on legislative issues and rule writing and the campaigns for doing that, policy and the politics of doing it. And she also helped me walk the line as a manager where my heart was with labor. My mother is a role model. Well, Karen Klaus, who used to be the solicitor of the Department of Labor in the Carter administration, who's been my mentor and mentor in law school, she said, well, forget about Belle being a role model to emulate. There's no one like her. They broke the mold. You are doomed to failure if you expect to measure up. My mother was embarking on one final project, and she thought she could do it, and I actually believe she could have. She wanted to work on single-payer universal health care by organizing CEOs of major corporations to work in their own economic interest. We are the only major nation in the industrial world without health care as a right. U.S. companies are at an economic disadvantage in the international marketplace, carrying the cost of health insurance benefits. Bell thought there should be a groundswell of economic self-interest in the business community that would propel this country to universal health care as a right. This project now needs all of our work to carry it forward to completion. That includes Sherrod and Connie and, and Armin and Earl and everyone else in this room who knows business people, because it really is in their interest to be able to do this. We are also fortunate to have Belle with us for 97 years. I love her, I miss her, and I've not yet begun to fathom the depth of our loss. Thank you.
Belle's youngest daughter, Rachel Likover. Karen DeVolsky. Sorry.
I'm here.
It finally got to me. I think it was single payer plan that did it. This lovely woman is Rachel Likover, Belle's youngest daughter.
Good afternoon. I'm going to go a slightly different way today. I want to tell you a family story. One evening in the year following my mother's 90th birthday, I was sitting at her dining room table with my son Sean and my nephew Joshua, and we were playing a game of Texas Hold'em poker. Each of us put $1 in the middle of the table, and whoever was going to win at the end of the evening would get the $3 pot. We were having a great time, and my mother sauntered into the room. "You're gambling. I don't want gambling in my house." "Mom, it's cards for $1. I don't care how much it is. I'm opposed to gambling. I don't want gambling in my house." "Okay, it's your house. We respect your rules." We each took our $1 back, and we went on and did something else. Time marched on. A few years later, I'm calling her up. "Hi, Mom, how's it going?" She's, "Oh, Rachel, I must tell you. We are having so much fun at the apartment building. We've started a poker night. We have a whole group of us. We play poker. We are having a ball." "Oh, really? So, Mom, are you playing Texas Hold'em?" "We play Texas Hold'em. We play 5-card stud. We play all kinds of poker. We just have a ball. We have fun." "Oh, really? So, Mom, are you playing for money?" "Of course. It's no fun if you don't play for money." "But Rachel, it's only $5, and we let you play in poverty if you run out." I said, "You know, Mom, it's great, but I got to hang up right now because I have to go and call every one of your grandchildren to tell them that even when you get to be 90 years old, it's still possible to grow and change and accept new things." And as we've been saying here, my mother was a small woman. She lived a large life. And I believe one of the keys to that large life was that she really embraced change. She didn't get into ruts, and she loved learning new things. And for those of us who want to emulate her and carry on her legacy, I think we would do well to always want to grow, accept new ideas, do new things, and I think that can help us enhance and enlarge our lives. Thank you.
Now, Karen DeVolsky, granddaughter, daughter of Rachel.
A little taller. Thank you all for being here to honor Belle, who I was lucky enough to call Grandma. Today there will be and has been much praise of her tireless activism and her ability to approach the flaws and deficits in our society with an optimistic creativity that was astonishing to her peers and intimidating to her opponents. There's much that can and should be said on these aspects of her life and her personality, but I would like to focus on some observations from a granddaughter's perspective. My grandmother Belle was stubborn in her idealism. She was also a pragmatist. And this could, of course, be observed in her public activities, but also in her more private missions. For example, one of her missions in life was to infiltrate my wardrobe with as many cast-offs from hers as possible. I repeatedly explained to her that with a 12-inch height difference and a 70-year age difference, We did not necessarily need to dress in the same clothes. Nevertheless, she persisted. She was stubborn, but she was also successful. Today, there are several items in my wardrobe that were previously worn by my 4'10", 97-year-old grandmother. So over time, she realized that I was more likely to say yes to certain kinds of things than others, and she adapted accordingly. Because, of course, she was pragmatic. And if you know the Likover clan, you would probably agree that in addition to Belle's success in infiltrating our wardrobes, she was successful in passing on this sense of stubbornness into her children and her grandchildren. And while we should all try to emulate her passion, her empathy, and her optimism, I hope we remember as well that being stubborn in your ideals, but pragmatic in your approach, is what Belle Likover stood for, and what we should carry with us as we move forward, inspired by her extraordinary life. Thank you.
Now, Belle's grandson, Josh.
Hello, my name is Josh Likover. I'm Belle's grandson and also Louis Likover's son, who unfortunately also passed away last month. I'm from California, and I remember one time my dad said to me the first time I was flying out to see my grandmother Belle, he said, "It's good to see your grandparents as often as possible. They won't be around forever." That was in 1980. Grandmother was 60, and none of us, I think, could have imagined she'd be around another 37 years. And I often, as I would visit her, typically at least once a year, I often thought back to my dad saying that, and there was a little piece of me, and I think a lot of us, that thought maybe she is going to go on forever. Although I live in California, I was lucky enough for the past 12 years to have a job based out of Cleveland, so I was able to spend a lot of time with Belle, and her energy level was just amazing. A couple of years ago, I was staying with her, and she invited me to go swimming, and she started doing her water exercises and invited me to do those along with her, and after about an hour, I started to get really tired, and I said, "I'm ready. I'm ready to bail on this. I'm done." But I said, "There's no way I can. My grandmother in her 90s is still going strong, so I'm just gonna have to get through it, and not complain, and look like it's no big deal." She was up to her last days. She was very sharp and very competitive. Used to love word games. We played Scrabble. Very intense games. She loved to win and hated to lose. We're probably the only people that played Scrabble that, most times if you play Scrabble, you might go a minute or two before the other person makes their move. We would play, and she'd take a half an hour just to make sure that not only did she use the best word she could come up with, but that she didn't leave me any spots for me to make my words. So we had some really epic Scrabble games. She had a great sense of humor, loved to laugh. I keep thinking about her laugh always. She tended to be more concerned about others than herself. One thing that really stood out, I was fortunate enough when she had made her decision to stop eating, and we knew she wasn't going to be around for much longer. I got to talk to her over the phone, and we had a real nice emotional conversation, and we said our goodbyes. And then after the conversation was over, she just really casually and kind of happy-go-lucky said, "So, how's everything else going for you?" And that's kind of what I appreciate as being my last memory of her.
Belle's nephew, Fritz Polachek.
So I'm Belle's older sister Zelda's third child. And in the latter years of my mother's life,
I was lucky enough to be able to spend a week or so in the summer with Belle at my mother's fabled shore house in Townsend's Inlet, New Jersey. And I had friends who couldn't understand why I would want to spend my vacation time with these two elderly women. And the truth is, it was a lot of fun. I mean, there were nights we stayed up past 9 o'clock. Now, we didn't do things that most people would consider to be special. We went swimming. We ate a lot of leftovers. We sat around the dining room table and talked, and we played games. And one of the games that Belle particularly enjoyed, you may be surprised to learn, was called Spite and Malice. It's a complicated card game. It uses multiple decks of cards. It's a cruel game, really, because just when you think you're in a position to win, your opponent can find a way to mercilessly crush you. Now, I lost at Spite and Malice to Belle over and over and over, and that was bad enough. But the worst part was she had this victory laugh. It sounded like a trill followed by a cackle. It was sort of like, So bear with me, there's a reason that I'm relating this. So in 2011, my uncle Al Levinson passed away, and he had the great and good fortune to be married to my wonderful and talented Aunt Madgie, and they lived in Toledo. So I came to Ohio to go to Al's memorial. I stayed in Cleveland with Belle, and Terry and Rachel and Joe and my wonderful Aunt Pearl, Belle's youngest sister. We drove to Toledo for the memorial. And when the memorial was over, we all came back, and everybody else left, and it was just sort of Belle and I for a couple of hours because my flight was later. And we were talking about end-of-life issues, and it was a great conversation because while Belle had little confidence in an afterlife, she was completely at ease about the subject. And as we were talking, the conversation just gravitated towards what her memorial would be like. And I said, you know, Belle, at your memorial, there'll be a great number of people who will say wonderful things about you, all of which are true. But I think that in the interest of full disclosure, it should be noted that you cheat at cards. Now, I know I'm a terrible card player, but for you to win so regularly, so consistently, I mean, statistically, it's not possible unless you were cheating. She immediately denied it. Then she thought for a minute, and she said, you know, Fritz, I have always been an ardent defender of the right of free speech. So if you want to bring this up at my memorial, it's okay with me. And then she gave me one of these. Provided you promise to read my rebuttal to the charge, which I agreed to do. I'm going to miss losing at cards to my Aunt Belle.
Our final family member speaking is Bill's sister, Madge Levinson, who will also be reading a letter that was sent in from another sister, Pearl Rubenzik. I'm very short. Belle was taller than I am. Even though you say she was little, she was short. I was even shorter. This is a very short story about Belle's teenage years, as told by her youngest sister, Pearl, and read by her sister, Maggie. My memories of Belle go way back to when she was a teenager and I was a little girl.
She was 6 years older than me. She was my daddy's favorite. He loved us all, but Bella and he had a special connection which I always respected. One day, Bella brought home a turtle from school. It was an enormous turtle. None of us knew about it. She put it in the bathtub, in our only bathroom. She left it there thinking it wouldn't go anywhere. Daddy came home at his usual time and went upstairs to wash up and change. After a short time, we heard him say in a very quiet voice, "Sarah, there's a turtle in the closet." We all ran upstairs, and sure enough, there was this turtle in our closet. Bella took claim to it and said it was from school. We laughed and laughed, and the enormous turtle went back to school. Bella was the first one of us sisters to learn how to drive. She decided, after she had passed her test, to drive to Pittsburgh. Daddy didn't give her permission to do this, and she went anyway. When she came home, she had been in her first accident, and she was really scared about telling Daddy. When she finally did tell him, she said, "The bridge just bumped into me." This is a parenthesis. This is my own interpretation. It wasn't the bridge just bumped into me. She said, "The bridge jumped up at me." Well, without one word of reprimand, Daddy sat down on the curb of the street and laughed his head off. Once he was able to talk, he said, "That's the way you learn." There wasn't anything that Bella and our sister Zelda, the Glitter twins, as we called them, didn't know. I believed this to be true. I was enamored with them at all times. I looked up to them. Many of us wanted to be Belle. I love my sister very much. She was a guiding light to me. She was strong and smart, and I miss her very much. I carry on in her memory. That was from Pearl. And I want to stick to this 3 minutes. So I would like to add, Belle was always my role model, to use a word. I always wanted to be just like Belle. I think it's because Daddy loved Belle most of the 5 girls. And so I tried to be just like Belle. And when Belle went to college, she was majoring in chemistry, and she got her degree in chemistry. And just at about the time she got her degree in chemistry, I graduated from high school, and I wanted to be just like Belle, and so I went to get a degree in chemistry. Not at her school, but anyhow, so I got my degree in chemistry, and she went and got a degree in social work. Skip ahead, or rather just skip back. This was right after the war, and Belle had lots of friends at Ohio State. One of them was Al Levinson. He had just come back from fighting the war, and he said to Belle, "I'm going to go and get a master's of social work at the University of Chicago." And she said, "Oh, I have a little sister in Chicago. Look her up." So he did. He said many people told him to look people up, but when Bella told him, look somebody up, by golly, he had to do it. And 3 months later, we were married. But Belle went into social work, and she got her master's. My husband had his master's. So I got my master's social work by proxy. I cannot imagine a world without Belle. Thank you.
And now, Rabbi Dan Robert.
Everybody here will be pleased to know that I'm the last. But I really, if I were smart after that speech, I would say amen, but let's not vote on that. Oliver Shalom, Lewis, and Terry and Hans, and Joseph and Amy, and Rachel and Scott, and sisters Florence and Zelda, Zichronam, Livracha, and Madge, and Pearl, and grandchildren Joshua and Jacob and Cale and Sean and Karen, Dorothy, and sisters-in-law, friends, community. I can't tell you how honored I am to be here because I was asked to do this funeral. It was one of Belle's wishes. In the old Temple Emmanuel on Green Road, and I don't know how many of you ever had the opportunity to be there, when we redecorated the building in 1987, we placed upon the doors of the ark 36 gold circles. They were symbolic of what is called the Lamed Vavnik Tzadikim Nistarim. Now, all of you know what that means exactly. But you got to say a Lamed Vavnik. A Lamed Vavnik is part of a legend that there are 36 righteous people in every generation upon whose merit the world is kept from entire destruction. Most versions of this legend declare that the hidden 36 are unknown to the world and cannot be known to others or to themselves. They are humble servants of their fellows, tirelessly working to dry tears, show compassion, and shoulder the burden of those who suffered. The Lamed Vavniks are not powerless in this wicked world. Rather, they use the gifts and talents which they possess to lift up all of those around them. They help to save us all. Guess what? One of the Lamed Vavniks is no longer hidden. Because although probably we didn't recognize it at the time or give her credit, Belle Likover was probably one of those 36 circles that are hidden in the woodwork. You have heard over and over again of her activism. She worked tirelessly to dry the tears of elderly and to get them to work on their own behalf. She worked, as we heard over and over again, on health issues on behalf of the less fortunate and herself. She worked on both sides of the aisle on behalf of righteousness and justice, on behalf of the good for all. Belle Likover had a larger vision of how this world all fits together and how all 36 righteous people can help to create it. We have heard all these wonderful things about this Lamed Vavnik, but I need to point out a few others which haven't really been mentioned. Of her wonderful and being a wonderful supportive husband, wife to Ed, her husband for 45 years. One who was an equal in intelligence. I still marvel at the fact that at age 50, when the other students were the friends, the children of her friends, she got her degree, her master's at SAS. She was a motivator to her husband, and of course a regular disciplined exerciser, the aquatic aerobics, a cross-country skier, which nobody has mentioned, fishing, a bridge player, as we heard, a word player, and a winner at all of that. That was very cute. A traveler with Ed to Israel and Greece and Europe and Hungary, Russia, to the national parks. We haven't talked about her painting skills. That wonderful. And when you walk around and see what she did, copper enamel, glass blowing. And nobody has talked about her wonderful dancing skills with Ed and the two of them putting on a show. And of course, we've heard and sensed her great sense of humor. How many of you saw the movie about Belle? The rest who haven't, or those who have, will certainly have to admit that you learned what I learned by watching the movie. Why do men live long? Why do men live shorter than women? For those who don't know the answer to that question. But she said it, so it's not just me. It's because when women go to the bathroom, they sit down. And when men go, they stand up. And it's all that extra sitting time that extends the life of women. And nowhere does it say about this Lamed Vovnik being a great cook. Veal Parmesan was her specialty. And one of the skills that she had is she could go out to the restaurant, have a delicious meal, and come back and recreate it. And nobody has really talked about her Passover Seder for 50-some people, that she catered all of herself, and then she would go around the room and introduce each one of them with a short remark about them. We heard that she was, as Ed said, a little giant. In visiting the family the other day, I heard of her closeness to her mother, Sarah, and then I heard the story of her closeness to her father. But you didn't mention that she kept the books for him at all. And so budgets were never an object for her because she was very close with you, her sisters, with Faggy and Zelda, Zechronam, Livraka, and Madge and Pearl. And there was joy, as we heard, with each one of you. And then I heard and sensed the other day this wonderful relationship she had with her children and their mates, with Terry and Hans and Joseph and Amy and Rachel and Scott, and with Louis, Zechronam, Livraka, and Bobby. I heard how she respected and admired, and you respected and admired her, and vice versa, and how she was the model and mentor to you. That the incredible care that all of you gave her over this past period of time, and the kind of pushing that Louis did. He said to her, you can live or you can wither away. And he pushed her to live, and she did. And we can simply say that she did live. So let me close with a poem written by a friend of mine who unfortunately has passed away. He went by the title of the pen name of Sean Yiddle, and he wrote this poem, which I think is totally appropriate for Belle. And she would recite to us, I would hope I've done well, that my lifetime record shows me a giver, not a taker. Hopefully lightened hearts created laughter and light, with effort sincere sought poor and ill and carrying their fight. If when I go, memory sparks a precious, tender thought, wherein one recalls that I raised my hand and also fought. So if a home is happier because I was there and tried, then friend, not only did I live, I never really died. Belle, not one home, but many, many are happier because you were part of this world. You filled your life with meaning. You filled ours with meaning. And so we say now to Bell Likover, L'chiba Shalom, go in peace. Go in peace with a sense of accomplishments in this world. L'hitraot, Bell, until we meet again. Argue as we heard and see that you have advocated, even with God, on our behalf. Well, we've sat here for an hour and a half, and listened to all the different words that one person has created in this world. I'm sure that there are a few of you who would, I wish I could have said this or that. And why don't we take a moment and say those words to Bell right at this moment in silence. For Bell Likover's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever. For her companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues to the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of her heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God, and may the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. And let us say, Amen. We rise for the El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Ba'amromim, Amsei Menucha Nechuna Tachat Kamfei HaShechina, Im Kedoshim Ataharim Kazohar Haraki Amazirim, Et Nishmat, Bella Bat Yaakov Vasara, Shahalacha La'olama. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Bell Likover, the daughter of Jacob and Sarah Weiner, who has entered eternity. Baal harachamim yasti reha b'sedek kenafav lolamim v'yitzur b'tzur ha'chaim et nishmata Adonai hu nachalata v'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava v'nomar Amen. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. And we all say, Amen. Together we recite the words of the Kaddish Prayer. And we say, Yit Gadal, Yit Kadash, Shemei Rabbah, B'almad Divarach Chirutei, V'yamlich Malachutei, B'chayechon, V'yomechon, V'chayei Dechol Beit Yisrael, B'agalav V'zman Karib, V'yimeru. Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah Mevarach Le'olam Omei Omaya. Yit Barach V'yishtabach V'yit Ba'ar V'yit Ramam V'yit Naseh V'yit Adar V'yit Alev V'yit Alal Shemei D'Kudishah Barichu La'ela Minka Birachata V'shirata Tushvachata V'nechamata Da'amiran B'yama V'yimru. Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chaim Aleinu V'yakol Yisrael V'yimru. Amen. Osei Shalom B'mramav Huyasei Shalom Aleinu V'yakol Yisrael V'yimru. Amen. The departed Bell Likover, whom we now remember, has entered into life eternal. She will continue to live on earth in the acts of goodness she performed and in the hearts of those who cherish her memory. May the beauty of her life abide among us as a loving benediction, and may the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort all the bereaved among us, and let us say, Amen. You may be seated. This concludes our service here. The family will be receiving following services tonight until 8 o'clock at the Likover residence at 17100 Van Aken Boulevard. Contributions can be made to the ACLU of Ohio or the National Council of Jewish Women or the charity of your choice. On behalf of the family, because I really told them they're not supposed to say thank you for coming, On behalf of the family, they are so appreciative that each and every one of you were here. Your presence is a real gift to them. This concludes our service.